They threw me out with 2 suitcases and $200. I returned as the new owner of their mansion. My mother-in-law handed me 2 suitcases and $200 in cash, told me to be gone before her son got home, and locked the front door behind me. 9 years later, I walked back through that same door holding the deed to the house, because it was mine. If you enjoy stories about quiet women who come back loud, hit subscribe, because this one is for you. My name is Grace, and I married into money I never asked for. I grew up the daughter of a single mother who cleaned offices at night to put me through community college. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and my mother, Ruth, taught me one thing above everything else. Never let anyone make you feel small for where you came from. I met Bryce at 26 at a friend's engagement party. He was charming in that effortless, expensive way. Tailored jacket, easy laugh, a watch that cost more than my car. My best friend Colleen pulled me aside that same night. "Something feels off about him," she said, watching him talk over 3 different people at the bar. "He never actually listens. He just waits for his turn to talk." I laughed it off. I told her she was overthinking a 5-minute conversation. I wanted so badly for this to be the beginning of something good. Bryce's mother, Diane, owned the family. Not just the house, but everyone in it. She was the widow of a real estate developer, and the 6-bedroom mansion she lived in, with its circular driveway and imported marble floors, had been in the family for 3 generations. From the moment Bryce introduced us, Diane looked at me like an appraiser looks at a flaw in a diamond. "So you're a receptionist," she said at our first dinner, in a tone that made the word sound like an accusation. I said I was actually studying to become a paralegal. She smiled thinly and said, "How ambitious," in a way that meant the opposite. The first year with Bryce was intoxicating. Trips I couldn't have afforded on my own, dinners at restaurants with no prices on the menu, a proposal on a private balcony overlooking the coast. He told me I was different from every woman he'd dated, grounded, real, not after his money. I believed him completely. We moved into the mansion's guest wing after the wedding, at Diane's insistence, just until you two find something suitable. 3 years later, we were still there. The cracks started small. Bryce began correcting how I dressed before family dinners. Diane prefers something more classic. Then it was my job. "You don't need to work," he said 6 months into the marriage. It embarrasses my mother, honestly, having a daughter-in-law clock in somewhere. I quit the paralegal program I'd been 18 months from finishing. Then my friendships started thinning out, one by one. Bryce always had a reason I shouldn't go, a family obligation that conveniently overlapped, a comment that made me feel guilty for wanting time away from the house. Colleen and I saw each other less and less. When she'd call, Diane would answer if I wasn't near my phone and simply say I was resting. The first major incident happened at our 3rd anniversary dinner, in front of 12 of Bryce's relatives. I mentioned offhandedly that I missed working, missed having something of my own. Bryce slammed his glass down hard enough to crack the stem. "You'd have nothing without this family," he said, loud enough for the whole table to go silent. "You'd still be answering phones in a strip mall." Diane didn't defend me. She smiled into her wine glass. I sat there, humiliated, while 12 people pretended to study their plates. He apologized that night with flowers and a $5,000 bracelet. The calm lasted 3 weeks. The next blow-up, over a dress Diane deemed inappropriate, lasted 2 weeks before it happened again. Each apology got shorter. Each calm phase shrank. By year 6, the peace between incidents lasted days, not weeks. Through all of it, one person never let go of me, my mother. Ruth called every single week, even when I gave short answers, even when I made excuses for missed visits. "You've gotten quiet, Gracie," she told me once. "You used to talk with your hands. You used to laugh with your whole face. I miss that girl." I brushed her off. I told her everything was fine. She never stopped calling anyway. The ticking clock arrived in year 8. Diane announced she was finally revising her will and the mansion's ownership structure, consolidating everything under a family trust before a scheduled hip surgery. "Just a formality," Bryce said. But I noticed how tense he'd gotten, how many late-night calls he started taking in the garage with the door shut. One night, unable to sleep, I went looking for a phone charger in his home office and found his laptop open, still logged into his banking app. What I saw stopped my breath. A second account. One I'd never known existed, with a balance of over $340,000. Money quietly siphoned over years from what I'd believed was our joint savings. The same savings he'd told me again and again we couldn't afford for me to go back to school with. Attached to the account were messages between him and a woman named Sabrina, spanning 18 months, planning what he called the exit. A future without me, funded by money that was supposed to be ours. I didn't confront him that night. I called my mother instead, at 2 a.m., voice shaking. For the first time in years, I told her everything. The isolation, the humiliation, the shrinking apologies, and now this. "Get out," she said immediately. "Tonight, if you can. But get proof first, baby. Proof is what protects you." The next morning, Ruth drove 3 hours to help me photograph every document, every message, every bank statement I could find, saving copies to a drive she kept in her own name, somewhere Bryce and Diane would never think to look. 2 weeks later, everything came apart at once. Diane discovered I'd been quietly requesting my own credit report and property records, something my mother had suggested, since the house itself had been transferred through a series of legal loopholes I didn't fully understand yet. Diane confronted me in the kitchen, and in front of the housekeeper, called me a gold-digging mistake her son would regret for the rest of his life. Bryce, instead of defending me, stood silently by the window. That same afternoon, Diane packed 2 suitcases from my closet herself, handed them to me at the front door, along with $200 from her purse, and told me to be gone before Bryce got home from work. As though I were staff being dismissed, rather than family. I stood on that driveway, holding everything I owned in 2 bags, and I felt something inside me finally go still and clear. My mother picked me up that night. In her tiny kitchen over tea, she told me something I never forgot. "That house wasn't your prison, baby. It was just a building, and buildings can change hands." Then she handed me the drive of evidence we'd built together and a business card for a lawyer she'd already spoken to that morning. What Diane never knew, what Bryce never bothered to understand, was that the family trust she'd rushed to finalize before her surgery had been drafted with a legal error, one that briefly left the mansion's title vulnerable during a 6-month transition window. My lawyer found it within days of reviewing the property records. Combined with clear evidence of Bryce's hidden accounts and marital asset concealment, my divorce settlement wasn't just favorable, it was decisive. The court awarded me a significant share of marital assets, including the mansion itself, due to the improperly executed trust transfer and Bryce's documented financial deception. 9 years after I first walked through that mansion's front door as a nervous 26-year-old, and less than a year after being thrown out with 2 suitcases, I walked back through it, holding a deed with my name on it. Diane was still living there when the paperwork finalized, still certain somehow that this was all a misunderstanding that money and lawyers would fix. It wasn't. I gave her 90 days to vacate, the same courtesy she'd never once shown me. Bryce lost the house, lost most of his hidden savings to legal fees and the divorce settlement, and lost Sabrina within 3 months once she realized there was no fortune left to run away with. Diane moved into a modest condo across town, and I heard through mutual acquaintances that she still tells people the house was taken from her unfairly, never mentioning the trust her own impatience had broken. I finished my paralegal certification 18 months after the divorce. I work now, by choice, at a firm that specializes in family and estate law. The exact expertise, I've come to realize, that saved my life. My mother lives with me in the mansion's guest wing now, the same wing I once occupied as an outsider. She has her own key. She never needs to knock. If this story reminded you that quiet people can win the loudest, make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'm sharing the story of a woman who discovered her husband's business trips were actually a second family 3 states away, and the one voicemail that unraveled everything. You won't want to miss it.